Just ahead on American Black Journal. For the first time in its 84-year history, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation is being led by an African-American woman. June Montgomery Tabron is my guest today. We'll talk about her life growing up in Detroit and her goals for one of the most admired foundations in the nation. Stay right here. American Black Journal is next.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. It's been 1 year since LeJeune Montgomery Tabron made history at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in Battle Creek, Michigan. She became the organization's first African-American and first female president and CEO. As head of one of the country's largest philanthropic foundations, she oversees Kellogg's efforts to improve the lives of at-risk children and their families. The foundation's work focuses on 5 areas: educated kids, healthy kids, secure families, community and civic engagement, and racial equity. I'm pleased to welcome LeJeune Montgomery Tabron to American Black Journal. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So that is a very wide-ranging list. I mean, you could work, as you have for decades, on improving those things. I want to start with the moment that I think we're sort of experiencing now in Detroit. The bankruptcy's over. The grand bargain played an incredible role in sort of propping up the city and its retirees and its institutions. Now we're out of it, but the work is not over. And the foundation community really, I think, has a key role to play going forward.
Absolutely, and I think we learned a lot from that endeavor, particularly around how foundations can partner, and how partnerships require more than just philanthropy, but business and public sector as well. And I think we now have a structure to continue to work together as we look about the future of Detroit as a city.
Right. So that collaboration that resulted in the grand bargain, in your view, is sort of, it wasn't a one-time effort. This is something that will carry forward into the work that needs to be done.
I hope not. I hope it won't be just a one-time effort.
Yeah.
And every foundation is different, right? You read my list, and there are other lists.
Right.
But there are intersections. And what I hope is in those intersecting points that we do continue to figure out how to leverage one another's resources and really collaborate and work together. And I believe that, the next real moment for Detroit is, how we prepare children and the workforce of Detroit for the future.
Right. Let's talk about that. You are a product of Detroit. I am a product of Detroit. We got to the places that we are through opportunity. Opportunity in schools, economic opportunities, things like that. Those opportunities are not nearly as plentiful today as they were when we were children.
That's absolutely correct, and they need to be. When I was growing up, I didn't have a doubt that there wouldn't be support structures in place to get me where I was going. Today, I run into too many children that are actually hopeless. They're not dreaming like we were able to dream. And their prospects are limited because they're disengaged.
Right.
And so, what I want to do is to really be a part of child-focused effort in Detroit moving forward.
Okay.
From education to health to family and economic security of families. So that list that you read, it sounds long, but it all works together.
But it all works together.
Absolutely.
So if I'm looking at the work that the Kellogg Foundation is doing in Detroit right now, give me some examples of ways in which you're fulfilling that mission.
One of the things that I'm most proud about is one of our grantees, the Detroit Parent Network. You hear a lot about how families need to be engaged, and the foundation has an entire family engagement strategy, and we're very much focused on how parents are understanding what's happening in their community and owning the advocacy of how to move communities forward.
Right. And for viewers who are not familiar, the Detroit Parent Network is a group of parents who are trying to disseminate information and set an agenda for improving educational choice and opportunity in the city, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you guys are helping to fund that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we also, you may hear of many investments we've made in education in Detroit.
Sure.
And you'll know that that's both in the Detroit public school system and in very successful charters. What we want is systems that work.
Right.
And we've been very intentional about finding those that are really developing children toward success.
And where do you feel like we stand with that? And just in terms of the investments that you guys are making, I mean, most parents in Detroit, I think, are frustrated
Yes.
by the current state of the public schools,
Right.
the lack of choice.
Yeah.
Other than those schools, where are you seeing your investments start to pay off?
First of all, we have a lot of work to do
Yeah.
in this area.
Right, sure.
And where we believe we can be most successful is in the very early ages of children.
Okay.
So we've been looking very much even before kindergarten,
Right.
those 0 to age 8, that time frame.
Those years, those
and really
critical development years.
prenatal,
Sure.
working with the mothers and the families. But we believe that, and research shows that investments there really pay off for children. And we want to make sure that, as we move forward, that we give children the best start. Looking at those preschool programs, the Head Start programs we've invested significantly in a collaborative for the Head Start grantees here in the state, in Detroit.
In Detroit, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're working, as you said, with other foundations. It's not a one-off. It's not a sort of you're out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are talking to each other and figuring out which things make the most sense.
Yeah, and we're working with not only other foundations, but local organizations and actually people on the ground. Because the Kellogg Foundation's approach to this work is definitely a community-driven approach.
Right.
We believe that the change will last and sustain itself when the community decides what they want.
To sort of adopt the
Exactly.
change model for itself.
Exactly.
And decide on its own
Right.
what that change should look like and who should benefit.
Absolutely. We can give them information. We can build their capacity. We can even focus on leadership, which we've done recently in our new leadership program. But at the end of the day, it's those people and the collaborative of people that get us forward and take us forward.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I want to switch gears here and talk a little about you and the history that you're making as the first woman, first female CEO of the Kellogg Foundation, the first African American as well. That's a big, big deal, and I think for a foundation that has the history that Kellogg has, the length of time and the kind of place it is, it's really remarkable that you're doing this.
It's been fun.
Right.
And it definitely wasn't on my, career aspirations list when I was a child. But it's an interesting story because when I began working at the Kellogg Foundation, it was a time when they were a very small organization, and they actually never even posted openings. It was more through a network.
Yeah, it was very sort of internal. The kind of way, yeah.
So I was actually recruited to come there, had not applied, and learned about the organization through the interview process.
Okay.
And again, I just feel like, part of that was just destiny. And I was, placed here for a purpose, and I continue to pursue that purpose.
Yeah, yeah. And what? Let's talk about your background before Kellogg. What got you in the position to come to Kellogg?
Well, I'm a certified public accountant, and so I was working in public accounting in this area for Plant and Moran, and I believe that through one of my audit clients, my name was brought forward. But it's interesting how I became an accountant, because I'm from Detroit, from a family of 10 children.
Okay.
My parents migrated north from Clarksdale, Mississippi, and so while some of my older siblings were born in Clarksdale, I was actually born here
in Detroit.
Sure. But because I'm number 9 of 10 children, I had mentors. They happened to be my brothers and sisters, as well as my parents. And I was actually introduced to accounting from my older sister. And
is that right?
Really knew at a very early age that I wanted to be an accountant. I went to Cass Tech, and I majored in the business curriculum there and took accounting courses. Went on to University of Michigan and majored in accounting, and knew exactly what I wanted to do there as well. And was on a path to become, I hoped, a partner in a public accounting firm. Until one day I get this call.
Then the road forks, and you go a different way. Yeah, but that role modeling, that early role modeling that you talk about with your sister, that's one of the things that's so key for people in terms of opportunity. Seeing somebody doing something that you think, well, I don't know, why couldn't I do that as an adult? And that's one of the things that we really miss here in Detroit right now, because of the lack of opportunity and the persistent intergenerational lack of opportunity. That's a big hole.
It really is, and it is something that we think a lot about, particularly in the family engagement strategy, because I think we underestimate the influence of a family member. It doesn't have to be 2 parents. You know, there's this formula that gets presented, but I think we have to be creative about, you know, what family engagement really means and who can be part of the family. And in my case, you know, I learned from my siblings, both good and bad. And they learned some lessons for me. And fortunately, I didn't have to learn all of their lessons. Well, I learned them, but through them, and not experience those. But on the other hand, I had siblings that were very much focused on education. We had what we called in our family a library. But it was actually the pantry that we had taken the entire pantry and filled it with books.
Full of books instead of food,
encyclopedias and childcraft books. But that was the center of our world, our family.
And
we played school, we read all the time. We were exposed to, you know, different opportunities and, you know, career paths. And we can do that. That's not, you know, when we think about what it takes to get a child in a place for success, I don't think it's as complicated as we think it is.
But, and yet, you know, you look at what's going on in Detroit, we don't have enough of that. What does it take to sort of turn that tide so that there is more of it?
Again, I really think it takes kind of an entire community movement is how I think about it. Because we do need to fill some gaps. So we need to figure out and help the adults in the community be mentors and partners for children. We need to work on all caregivers. We need to look at, you know, those very early stages of development. Who can we place in those lives, and how can we support those individuals to be good mentors and partners for children? When
you talk to anybody right now about Detroit and what's going on and what the focus needs to be now that we're out of the bankruptcy, the first word out of almost everyone's mouth is neighborhoods. That those are the places that have had the least amount of investment, the least amount of attention, especially from government. You guys have been working in the neighborhoods for a long time. That's not new to you. But when you look at what is missing in the neighborhoods and what needs to be there, what is it that you see in the next couple of years that we really need to do to make a difference?
Right. I think we need to bring knowledge to people in the communities. And you know, we work in communities across the country,
Sure.
not just in Detroit.
Not just Detroit.
But there are some similarities in neighborhoods across this country, and where they access information, and how we put the information they need where they access it. And really getting people back engaged in what's happening in their community and believing that they can make a difference.
Right.
I think a lot of community members have lost hope, and you know, they've gotten into this place where they don't believe that investment is possible, and when it does happen, they're cynical.
Right.
So I think we got to build relationships at those very local levels, which means we have to listen to them. We can't go in there and tell them
what you're going to do. Right. Again, it gets back to that ownership piece, that they need to own the change.
And they won't do it until they have a level of trust of those who are coming into their space.
Right.
And so what we have to learn is how to build that trust, and it's a mutual exchange.
Sure.
Which means big foundations like the Kellogg Foundation can't come in so big.
Right. Right.
We have to you know.
You got to work on a much smaller level.
Yeah, we have to meet them where they are.
And what kind of response are you getting then from people in the neighborhoods in Detroit to that idea of Kellogg playing that role?
Well, I think it's a journey, right? And the first part of that journey is when we came out and made a commitment that we will be in these communities for the next generation.
Right.
Which in some cases is 20 years. So I think the first thing we have to do as we enter these communities is to earn credibility and build the trust that we're not going to just be the fly-by-night that's here for a moment and gone.
Right.
We're here.
Right.
We have an office here in Detroit. We are hiring staff from Detroit. And we know that it's going to take that in order to really have the longevity that it's going to take to move some of these issues.
Right.
And then we engage them, and we ask them for their
And when you say engage, I mean, we hear that word all the time, community engagement. What specifically do you mean by engage? When you say we're engaging them?
You know, when you invite them to a meeting, you invite them to a meeting where, you know, it's practical that they could come.
Right. You don't hold it
at
a time that's inconvenient, or
at a time where, you know, if they are working one or even two jobs, we consider their reality, and we meet them where they are as far as how we plan what needs to happen, and you do it 2 or 3 times, and you don't give up if it's a slow start.
Right.
And then you give them power.
Right. Right. That's right. Empower them to make the decisions.
And when they see that happens consistently, then what you get is this real authentic relationship where you understand what some of those immediate needs are that may need to be addressed before you can ever get to the real fundamental change levers. So that's what we work on.
You know, I wonder if you have thoughts about population in Detroit. When you grew up in Detroit, when I grew up in Detroit, there were a lot more of us in the city. I mean, I talk all the time about in the 1970s and 80s, the city was crowded. There were children everywhere. You could just, you know, anything you did, you waited in line for. My children growing up in the city now have a really different experience with that in terms of just the number of people. The city feels empty, and that, of course, in the neighborhoods drives all kinds of issues and problems. Is that something that how do you address that, and do you have to address it through population? In other words, do we have to have more people in Detroit to address some of these things, or are there ways around that?
In some ways, I hope it's both. I do want people to move back to Detroit and make Detroit a very vibrant city like it was when we were there. And I also believe that you need some level of investment of people and their taxes in order to build a revenue stream that can support the city.
Right.
Because the other thing that was there when we were young was, you know, a transit system that
Right.
was fully functional. I lived on the east side and went to Cass Tech. I caught 2 buses
And rode the
every
bus, sure.
morning
Right.
to school and back, but they were predictable.
And it worked, right?
And it
You
worked.
weren't late.
I was never late.
Right.
Exactly. So, you know, we also need that kind of infrastructure there, and places for children to go.
Sure.
And ways to connect some of these communities that maybe seem a little empty, but bringing people to a space that does seem more vibrant. A lot of times that's the faith community, but how do you expand on that?
Right.
And then really build community, regardless of whether that's the blocks from this street to this street,
Sure.
or expand that.
Right, right. I would imagine you talked about the partnerships you have with other foundations. You just mentioned the faith community. I would imagine you also have to have important partnerships with other kinds of institutions. But I'm curious also about the partnership with government, because government has struggled so long in Detroit just to function and deliver basic service. Is the foundation community now finding it easier, or is it a more effective solution to partner with city government?
I think that has to be part of the solution. When you think about the Kellogg Foundation, you know, when you look at us individually, we're $8.5 billion foundation. We give out about $300 million. It seems like a lot,
Yeah.
but when you think about what it takes to build a city,
Sure.
and that is a drop in the ocean.
That's right.
City government still has the bulk of the resource
Right.
to move
On
and
certainly
make
on an
good
annual
investments.
basis, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're learning and understanding is foundations can't work in isolation. We have to work in this multi-sectoral space,
Right.
and really bring business along, government, faith-based, and people, etc. Because it's going to take all of us.
Yeah. If you try to move the calendar forward a year, 2 years, 5 years, what kinds of changes do you think we'll see that will let us know that all of this pain and difficulty we went through financially has actually made a difference?
I hope, from a Kellogg Foundation perspective, I would really want to see continued investments in early childhood education.
Right.
We've had, you know, the Great Start investment, but what we'd like to make sure is that, you know, Great Start is prenatal, and
Goes
some
earlier,
investments that go earlier, before Head Start even, at least 3 years old. But we know by about 3 years, a child's brain has almost developed.
Right.
So part of the solution has to be this consciousness that that's our workforce for the future.
Sure.
Because the other part of the equation is this economic development engine that needs to be vital and real.
Right.
And so in order to attract businesses and people, et cetera, they need to know that there's a pathway and that they're going to be people employable.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that means our school systems have to be a part of this equation as well. So it's complicated, and that's why you see that long list of items that we have. But we look at it all collectively, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our racial equity agenda.
Well, right.
Because at the end of the day, you know, what I believe we have to face in this nation, and particularly everywhere, but in Detroit, is, you know, what were the results of racialization in Detroit that we don't want
that
to
we don't
repeat?
want to talk, right,
Exactly.
and that too many people don't want to talk about.
They don't want to talk about it, which means we will repeat it.
Right, right.
And we don't want to do that.
That's right.
And so we have to make sure that as these structures are rebuilt to support this city, that we don't build those the structures that oppress.
Right, you don't build in the inequities that already exist.
So I think, you know,
that's a singular agenda that could occupy all your time
all of
alone.
our time. But the way we look about that, we don't talk about anything unless we factor in how that is working
Race
in
and
that
the history
space.
of racism, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why it undergirds all of our work.
Right.
And I'm fortunate to work for an organization that gets that.
Right, right.
And to lead an organization
and is leading, I was going to say, put
that.
you in a position
Right.
to make those decisions and
Yes.
make those calls.
Yes.
All right. Well, obviously, it's great to have you here, and
Well,
great to hear about the work.
Me.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to seeing how all this all works out for everybody.
I hope it will. You know, one of the things that I believe it takes is the belief of those who are leading the change.
Right.
And what you'll find, at least from me and from many people at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, is we do actually believe,
Right.
that this is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's an important step.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guest at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can now hear episodes of American Black Journal on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.